What I want to do is start with some brief introductions from the additional moderators for this evening. Before we get to District Attorney Howard's introduction, before the moderators, let's start with maybe 30-second self-introductions. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why this race is important. And let's go in the order of Christian Y. Smith, and then we'll move on to Alfred Shivy Brooks. Then next we'll have Shari Jones, and then we'll end with Kenneth Mitchell, and then we'll have District Attorney's introduction. And so, Christian, the floor is yours. I believe you're unmuted now, Christian.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Christian Y. Smith. First of all, thank you all for taking the time to do this. This election is one of the most important elections in recent history in Fulton County. I was a former candidate in this race, running for Fulton County DA. I've been an attorney for almost 8 years here in the Atlanta area, and I'm glad to be a part of this conversation, and I'm glad to be supporting Mr. Howard now that I'm no longer in the race. I think his views align more closely with mine than the opponent. And I look forward to us being productive tonight and supporting Mr. Howard and making sure that we keep this this seat as Fulton County DA. Thank you.
All right. How you guys doing? My name is Alfred Shivy Brooks. I'm a high school educator here in the Atlanta area. I live in the Grant Park neighborhood and serve in Clayton County public school system. Teach government and economics, and it is an honor and a pleasure to be a part of the conversation and be a voice for educators at the table.
Good day, good people. I'm Shari Jones, and I'm an assistant district attorney at the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. I am your Zone 4 community prosecutor, and I'm also over all of our youth programs, such as Legal Lives, Junior DA, Teen Talk, and so many more things. This is extremely important to me because my priorities are community and youth, and Mr. Howard ties in all of that.
All right, I guess that leaves me. Good afternoon. My name is Kenneth Mitchell. I am an assistant district attorney as well in Fulton County, and thanks for having me. This is important because, number one, I'm a Democrat, and I'm also a lifelong resident of Fulton County. And so, and I guess additionally, I do work in the office as a prosecutor in the major case division. And so it's important to hear the ins and outs of the district attorney's office and give the listeners an opportunity to hear about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for those introductions. And as I mentioned before, for those of you that are joining this evening, we'll be dividing the conversation into 5 different topic areas. I'll begin with my questioning and allow District Attorney Howard to answer those questions. But if you do have questions throughout the process, please continue to submit those. For those that were submitted prior to, we've incorporated those into some of the different moderator segments. So we'll make sure that all of your questions get answered. And so, District Attorney Howard, again, good evening. We're thankful.
Good evening, Greg.
Yes, sir. We're thankful for you to be able to join us for this conversation on the real issues as the August 11th runoff quickly approaches. And so what I want to start with is kind of setting the tone of tell us a little bit about, when we talk about your proven track record, tell us a little bit about yourself briefly, and then we'll kind of start the questioning from there.
Well, this is really a privilege to participate in this forum. It's really great to see the current members of the DA's office. Seems like there's been a lot of criticism of the DA's office, but we've got some outstanding people who work in that office, and always glad to see Shivy and Christian Y. Smith. And thank you, and Greg, thank you so much for being here. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a career prosecutor. In fact, I've been a prosecutor for about 40 years. I'm a Morehouse College, Emory University graduate, and it has been my privilege to serve as district attorney here in the greatest county in the America, I believe, Fulton County, since 1997, and also to serve for one of the most amazing cities, and that is the city of Atlanta. Well, the reason that I point out that our county and the city of Atlanta are so amazing is because we've done something together that not many municipalities can match. And that is, we've grown our population while at the same time reducing crime. And Greg, as you know, most people will not move to an area that they don't believe is safe. So when I started as district attorney in 1997, the population in our county and in our city was stagnant. But since that time, the population in the city of Atlanta has grown by 26%. The population in Fulton County has increased by 47%. At the same time, in the city of Atlanta, violent crime has been reduced by 70%, and overall crime has dropped by 62%. In our county, 6 of our municipalities are now recognized among the top 50 safest places in the whole state of Georgia. That was a lot different from when I started. We were overrun with crime. People wanted the violence stopped. And so I came into office making a very simple promise, and that promise was to reduce the violence. One of the other things that people were very concerned about in 1997 when I started was our jail population. We had between 48 and 5,000 people in the Fulton County Jail, a jail that was constructed for only 2,500 people. And we put into place in the DA's office something called the complaint room. It's a charging and screening device. And we were able to reduce the jail population from 4,800 to 2,400, cutting it in half, saving taxpayers about $50 million a year. People were also in 1997 concerned about diversity in the DA's office. We had very few prosecutors who were minorities, and we had very few women who were prosecutors who worked in the DA's office. In fact, I could probably count them all on one hand. But right now, 60% of our employees are minority, and 65% of our employees are female, and about 84% of our supervisors are females as well. But right now, we've got a new challenge, and that new challenge is the challenge of police reform. And I believe the only way that we're going to make progress is we have to be truthful, we have to face the truth, and we can't work under the influence of police unions. We've got to tell the truth to our citizens. We've got to be clear that there is systematic racism, there is bias against people of color in our community, and what that's resulted in is the death of Black men in our community. So I am asking people to please put us back in office, because we've already shown that we can make a big progress working on big programs and developing big programs. And that's what we're going to need to make this new change in our community, the change involving police reform. And thank you for the opportunity to answer any questions tonight.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And serving since 1997, we appreciate the statistics and all the information about what you've been able to do with you and your team when you talk about transformation of the district attorney's office over time, and what really sets the Fulton County District Attorney Office different than other counties across the state. I think that's very, very important when it comes to this type of conversation. And serving since 1997, District Attorney Howard, you know, the scrutiny around certain issues has certainly been there. We know that as a public official, that there have been some conversations out there regarding some scrutiny related to the office. And you know, when we talk about some of the recent sexual harassment allegations and the GBI investigations, all lodged against you, you know, do these allegations and investigations have any merit and that have been brought against you? And do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked the question, because they have no merit. The allegations that were brought against me, what I ask people to do is to look at my record of service to the county. served as 4 years as Solicitor General, served for 23 years as District Attorney, and none of the allegations were raised during that period. They are only being raised during this election cycle. In fact, the allegations that were filed against me by the female employees, the suits were filed during the very year of this election, some of them just 3 weeks before the election took place. I refer to them as campaign suits because certainly I don't get a chance to respond. But let me tell you, when I get a chance to respond, no matter what the forum is, I believe that I will be totally exonerated. Regarding the ethics complaints, I think the evidence will show that I did what Americans do almost every day. You apply for a raise, and that's what I did. I asked the people that I work for, the people in the city of Atlanta, to pay me a raise based upon my performance. I met with the highest officials in the city, the mayor, the president of city council, and the head of the public safety committee, and they agreed that I should receive the raise. I was not involved in the city's portion of it, but as I understand, the city council voted and passed it 14-0. When I received the increase that they sent over, the supplement, I wrote them back a letter immediately thanking them for it, and even pointed out that the nonprofit that has been so much conversation about, even pointed out in the letter that the nonprofit would be administering the payment. And so again, I believe in whatever stage or whatever investigative source is looking at it, the outcome will be exactly the same if they follow the facts, and I would be totally exonerated.
Indeed. Well, thank you for your candid response. We know that that's been a part of the conversation during this political cycle, and we appreciate your candor regarding that topic. Let's move on to Christian Wildsmith, a young man that was in this race, ran a very, very competitive race, and ended up in third place, and now has decided to support you on August the 11th for the runoff. Christian, I wanted to move on to you with some of the questions that you had when we talk about, real talk with District Attorney Howard. What were some of the things that you had as we move through some of the moderators? Christian, you still there with us? And I know he was in his vehicle. If he got cut off due to reception, it might be weather related with all the things going on. But we'll come back to him when he tunes back in. I'll be sure to keep a tab on that. But I definitely want to move on to Alfred Shivy Brooks. If you're ready with some of the questions that you had for District Attorney Howard, Shivy.
Sure. Again, I'm a high school educator. And one of the things that's really important for me is legacy. Because the things that we work on today have a lot of impact on my students, in their coming years. And I'm curious, Mr. Howard, what cases do you think that you have prosecuted or that your office has handled have had the most impact on our community, either for good or bad, and why?
Well, I appreciate the question, Shivy, and glad to see you again today. I think one of the things that has happened is that there is an overall theme from all of those cases that I think the community has had an opportunity to see. I know when I was growing up and I saw cases being presented and they would always show the lawyers on television, none of the lawyers were Black. They weren't Black men, they weren't Black women. And I always said that presents an awful story about America because it always seemed like the defendants were Black, but the prosecutors were never Black. And I always thought that it's a really important thing that we should be represented at the table. And so that is why diversity is one of the things that we have emphasized in our office. So one of the cases that I thought became really important for us was the case involving Corey Ward. And Corey Ward was a 19-year-old Black male who was shot by an Atlanta police officer because the police officer thought that the vehicle he was driving was stolen. it actually turned out that it belonged to his mother. And we investigated the case. We did it when we received a lot of criticism from the police union, but we presented it before a grand jury, and that officer was indicted. And the unfortunate part of that case was that when you looked at the whole history of the state of Georgia, that was one of the first cases that a white officer had ever been held responsible for shooting a black man. And I didn't know that so much until we did it, because so many people from our community came up and commented about it. And the other case I'm sure you will also remember is the case that happened with Katherine Johnston, a 92-year-old woman who was shot by the police. And the thing that's difficult about the case, on the day that it happened, the police gave an explanation for the incident, and the explanation was that the officers were justified. Afterwards we found out they were not justified. Those officers were charged in our office and ended up entering a guilty plea. And for those officers in that case, it marked one of the first times that police officers were actually sentenced to jail for causing harm to citizens in our community. So those are two cases that I think were real important for our community and the DA's office.
I think, well, some are aware and maybe more should be, but you are responsible for indicting more police officers than any other district attorney throughout the country. With that in mind, how have you worked to form relationships with police officers and other law enforcement agencies? And have you met any resistance because of your willingness to hold police officers accountable?
Well, as I also point out to people, a great majority of the police, in my opinion, are hard-working folks who mean the best for their communities, but there's something else that's going on in the police department that we have to face. And that other thing is the police unions, because it is the police unions that have provided most of the resistance to our prosecution of police officers. In fact, on every occasion, the criticism is that we're always rushing to judgment and we're always doing something political. And it is always the police union that is rallying the other officers to resist what we were doing. And one of the examples is what they did with the Rayshard Brooks case, when they were encouraging officers not to even come to work. But the other police officers realized that they are subject to the same laws as everybody else. And when they commit a crime, that they should be punished. And so as we go forward, one of the things that we're going to have to assess in our community is, how do we make reform? How do we improve our police department and do it with the police union? As you know, the city of Camden, they've already decided to get rid of the police union. In Minneapolis, that's what they're talking about doing right now, is getting rid of the police union. In California, they've asked the state bar to prohibit DAs from taking money from police unions. And also here in Atlanta, the National Bar Association, the NAACP, and the SCLC, they've made the same request. So that's one of the things that we have to deal with so that we can form better relationships with our police department.
Regardless of those desires of the NAACP and the Bar Association and many others, Ms. Willis has decided that she would take financial contributions from the police union. What should that tell the public? And why is it that you have not received dollars from police unions thus far in all of your years?
Well, I believe that the only reason that the police union is going to endorse a DA is that DA is going to have to decide or to indicate to them that they're not going to prosecute policemen. And I ask people not just to take my word for it, but to look for themselves. If you look at cities like Miami, look at cities like Phoenix, Arizona, Sacramento, California, and probably the greatest example is Los Angeles, where since the year 2000, they've had 1,800 shootings, and not one of those officers has been prosecuted. The DAs they've been supported by the unions. So I have said to the unions from the very beginning that I believe we should have one system of justice, not two systems, one for the police and one for everybody else. But I think all of us ought to preside under one system, and that's not what the unions want. Ms. Willis, when she accepted their endorsement, her words, she said, "Your vision is my vision." That's what she said to the union. We know what their vision is. Their vision is that none of the police officers should be held responsible.
I appreciate that. I don't want to hog the floor anymore because I'll keep going.
Shivy, hey man, we appreciate you, man, for joining the conversation this evening. We appreciate the work that you continue to do in the community as well. And so let's go back to Christian Wise Smith. Again, he was a young man that did very well in this race and has decided to support District Attorney Howard on August 11th during the runoff. Christian, are you there with us now? Let's see if I can unmute you. All right. If we aren't able to get Christian, are you there with us? Well, what we'll do, we'll come back to Christian. As folks saw, he's kind of moving around. We may have some troubles due to the weather, District Attorney Howard, but we definitely want to make sure Christian is a part of this moderated conversation when we talk about the real issues related to this race. I think he has a very good perspective as it relates to what's kind of been happening in the community as an attorney. And also as a candidate, so we want to make sure we incorporate him. But let's go to Shari. Shari, you are a very heavily involved in the community as well.
Yes.
And thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And so, did you have any questions? Or of course you do have questions, but I wanted to make sure you had some time to ask District Attorney Howard some questions as well as we move through the opportunity to speak with him on the issues.
I do, thank you. So my questions reflect that from the community. Mr. Howard, good day.
Good day.
Based on your body of work, you are considered to be one of the leading, most progressive prosecutors in our country. What does this mean, and how have you structured your office and programming to reflect a community prosecution model?
Well, one of the things that I discovered very early on is that if the office fails to establish some connection with the community, that you're really not going to make much progress. When I started in the DA's office in '97, the previous administration, their conviction rate for jury trials was 52%. And it was my assessment that the reason that people would not hold the defendants guilty is because they really had no relationship with the people in the DA's office. So they didn't know them, they didn't trust them, and so they would always move to acquit. As you know, Shari, we have now gotten to the point that our average conviction rate is around 92%, and we've been as high as 98%. And the reason that I mentioned that is because to me, that is a barometer of the DA's connection with the people in the community who end up serving on juries, but they also end up becoming witnesses for their own communities and their own, the communities and the state. So one of the things that I have tried to do is to make sure that we had a definite roots in our community. And for one of the other reasons that I think is really important is that young people like yourself, when they show up at the DA's office, they don't want a career that just involves putting people in jail. They really want to make a direct contribution to their communities by doing some other things, like the work that you do, working directly with community members. And I am just happy that we have been able to provide that source of connection and work for young people who simply might not have had any interest in just serving as a line prosecutor in court.
Thank you. Is that what motivated you to bring our Court Watch program to Fulton County?
Yes, that's what motivated me to do it. I wanted to be sure that we were rooted and grounded in the community. I wanted to provide an avenue of employment for people who had new ideas and new thoughts about how a district attorney's office should work. I wanted the community to be able to see prosecutors because they had them out in the community. And Shari, as you know, what started to happen is when I would have to move a prosecutor to some other location, for the first time, I had citizens complaining to me that, Mr. Howard, you are moving my prosecutor. That's how they looked at him. They said, that's my prosecutor and you shouldn't move them. And that was really a great source of enjoyment to me to hear the community say that.
Next question, Mr. Howard. What diversion programs have you established in your office that have had the greatest impact, not only on reducing and preventing crime, but also on giving people a second chance?
Well, we've got a couple of things going on. One of the things is we established a community court on Fulton Industrial Boulevard. And we did not just establish this diversionary court, we did it in the purpose in mind of revitalizing the Fulton Industrial Boulevard area because it had been overrun with crime. So we put the community court there, and the simple concept was that rather than focusing upon a sentence for defendants, we sat and talked with the public defender's office, with members of the community, and then we recommended some treatment process for the defendant. And as a result of that, we were able to decrease or reduce the crime in the area about 72%. And we've been credited with helping revive the Fulton Industrial Boulevard area by clearing up many of the long-term crime problems that they've had. We've got another project that we have recently started in our juvenile court system called Project Level Up. And we're focusing upon those juveniles who had been arrested 3 times. Rather than looking at those 3 arrests as some badge to get you incarcerated, we're looking at those as cries for help from young people. So we're working to figure out a way that they won't be arrested the 4th time by providing significant intervention. That intervention involves aftercare, it involves providing a mentor, and family intervention. Those are the kinds of programs that we put together. And we've got a long list of other programs, our DA's program, our legalized programs that we've operated. I mentioned before, I don't know if I mentioned it today, but we have a bicycle program that we had operated in the past, a reading program, but all of those are prevention and diversion programs to make sure that we work on the focus of preventing crime.
Well, I thank you, Mr. Howard, for your very thorough answers. You actually answered my next 3 questions. So I have one last question, and this one came from our audience members. Mr. Howard, when re-elected, will your conviction integrity unit expand the sentence modifications, including looking at mandatory minimums?
Yes, and that's one of the things that we plan to look at. We're also immediately going to look at some of the drug convictions for people in our county, particularly small amounts of drugs, to see what we can do in that area. The other thing that we're going to be examining is women who have been sentenced to crimes when the women themselves have been the victims of domestic violence. We're going to be looking at that area as well. And if the community has some suggestions for particular other areas that we should examine, we're anxious to hear what those are.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those questions, Shari.
Thank you.
Awesome. And so let's move on to another one of the moderators for this evening. Again, if folks during this conversation, you submitted questions beforehand, the moderators are incorporating some of those questions into their dialogue with District Attorney Howard as well. But if you do have questions, be sure to send them through the chat tool on Zoom as well. And so we'll move on to Attorney Kenneth Mitchell. Kenneth is also working in the legal space here in the city of Atlanta in the county. Very, very reputable name and brand here around the city and county. And thank you so much for joining us this evening, Kenneth.
All right, thanks for having me, Greg.
Indeed, indeed. And so, Kenneth, I'll let you have the floor and ask District Attorney Howard a few questions.
All right, how you doing, Mr. Howard?
I am doing great, Kenneth. How about yourself?
I can't complain, man. I had some questions, especially for some of the young attorneys and people interested in the legal profession. The office has a reputation for the training and the experience that people receive at your office. Could you talk to us about the model that you use to prepare your attorneys for experience beyond the DA's office?
Well, Kenneth, first of all, I'd like to say, man, it is great to see you in the office working in our homicide, our major case division, where you guys try cases involving murders and any deaths of citizens. And the reason that I say that, when I started as a DA, if an African-American or Black person worked in the DA's office, it always seemed that they were assigned to juvenile court or something else, but they were never assigned to the division that is the division that you serve in. And so I'm real proud that you are in that division and along with other Black lawyers and able to display your skills. Well, let me tell you one of the things that I have tried to do. I noticed that many of the offices would simply bring young lawyers to an office and in a sense just throw them in the swimming pool to see whether or not they could swim. And I've never believed in that philosophy. I believe that the lawyer should be trained. And as you know, one of our training processes is the complaint room that we put together in Fulton County. It gives the lawyers an opportunity, first of all, to familiarize themselves with the laws of the state. It gives them an opportunity to communicate with police officers, and it gives them an opportunity to communicate with witnesses and victims as well. You know, from that point, the lawyers get a chance to practice before our first appearance in all-purpose courts. They get a chance to actually go to court in cases where cases are not being resolved to a great extent, but they get a chance to practice before magistrates and develop their skills. So once the lawyers do that, then the lawyers get a chance to start either in our juvenile court or to work in our trial division. And that is the kind of building up of expertise that I believe is important to develop the skills of lawyers so that they can continue to use those skills as they move forward in our profession.
Okay, and thank you for that answer. And it's sort of similar to that answer. I have another question about diversity. As far as your training was concerned, was that the case prior to you coming? And also, what was the state of diversity in the DA's office when you inherited it?
Well, let me tell you, diversity was almost non-existent. When I started working for the DA's office, I believe even at that time, we had only had 3 Black lawyers or Black prosecutors who had handled the job of supervising a court by him or herself. And, you know, all the years of history in our county, we'd only had 2 or 3 Black lawyers to do that. I just thought it was a real shame. And even with the small number that we had in Fulton County, that number was far greater than Black lawyers in the remainder of the state. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure is that our office was open to Black lawyers, Black men and women. And one of the ways that we made this happen is by promoting our internship programs during the summer. Usually we provided jobs to 35 to 40 students. And so You know, when I was in law school, you couldn't get a job as an intern in the Fulton County DA's office. But what we did is we used our forfeiture money that had been seized from drug deals that was seized by our office. We used it to fund the internships with Black interns. And so it made it much easier for them to come and work in the DA's office. But it was always my design to make sure that when we had cases, no matter how complex, no matter the nature of the case, that Black lawyers would have an opportunity to participate in the litigation of those cases.
Okay, thank you. I got one last question. You talked about diversity and also the experience that people receive at your office. Could you tell us about some of the attorneys that have come through your office and the impact that they've had on the community?
Well, I think one of the greatest reflections of the quality of our office is the number of judges that have come from the DA's office. I think the number stands right now at 43. And those range all the way from part-time magistrates all the way to federal judges. One of the federal judges here in the Northern District of Georgia is Eleanor Ross, who came from the Fulton County DA's office. We've got another federal judge in New Jersey. His name is Hilton Miller. He's an administrative federal judge, and that Hilton came from the Fulton County DA's office. As you look around the state, you won't find another DA's office with 43 people who've become judges. And I think what it does, it's a testimony to the hard work and the quality of the Fulton County DA's office.
Okay, and I'm trying to find an audience question. I see one audience question that says, your opponent has spoken negatively about the culture and environment of your office, often stating publicly that the retention rate is an issue. What would be your response to that?
Well, I just think it's just absolutely untrue. The fact is that when I started in the DA's office, the turnover rate was somewhere near 50%. That meant that every lawyer that you employed, within a year, that lawyer would have moved on to some other job. And that was back in 1997. But since that time, our retention rate has been about 6%, sometimes less than that. And we've done a good job of keeping lawyers in the DA's office. When people make that contention to me, I always ask them to show me your numbers, because I can indicate the numbers which show that it could not be true. You can't reduce the crime by 70%. You cannot maintain a conviction rate of 92%. In fact, our appellate rate, when cases are appealed to the Supreme and the appeals court in Georgia, is about 98%. So you can't do that if you don't maintain a good staff. The other thing that I ask people to do is to look at the supervisors in the DA's office. And I think, Kenneth, you're well aware that most of our supervisors, they've had many years of experience. And it's really kind of interesting, the person who's complaining about that rate is a person who stayed in the office for 16 years. So I think even that person is an indication that people must stay at the DA's office for a very long time.
All right, thank you. I have no more questions, Mr. Howard.
Okay.
I'll mute myself here. Hey, Kenneth, thank you so much for your questions. And I'm going to still try to get Christian Wise-Smith. I know he had to join us via phone. Christian, can you still hear us here? If not, I wanted to, and we're still working. I apologize, folks that are tuning in. We're still trying to get Christian online. I know that he dialed in. Shivy, I know that you had some additional questions that you wanted to ask.
Sure. Yeah,
District Attorney Howard. And so I wanted to kind of pivot back to you as we continue this conversation, man. And again, I know that you do a lot of work in the community. You know, folks know your profile here. And so I'll yield the floor to you again for some of the questions.
Yeah, I appreciated that, the opportunity to ask just a few more questions. I wanted to try to make sure not to monopolize the floor.
I got you, man. I got you.
Mr. Howard and I had a conversation on my Instagram live show a week ago. And I mean, we went for like 2 hours. His team was like, oh, we gotta cut this off. And so I kind of know how that goes. And I think that's really because one thing I will say, whether you agree with Mr. Howard or not on things, you will hear his truth and you will hear transparency in it. And I think that's the least that we can ask, especially of our elected officials. Could you briefly talk on any changes that you intend to make in your office as you move forward? So if you were to be reelected, how would you be doing things different? How would you be adopting some of the progressive programs or ideas of individual like Christian Wise Smith or progressive thinkers that us younger millennials and Gen Zers are resonating with right now?
Well, and I think one of the things that we discussed on your show, the metrics are different now. When I started, the metrics for what a progressive prosecutor was defined as are a little different now. And so we got to adjust to those metrics. And one of the things that I believe every prosecutor has got to acknowledge is the issue of police reform. We've got to make a change in this country. When you see the demonstrations that have been going on in this country since May the 25th, when you see the NBA, the WNBA, and as I pointed out before, I'm amazed to see that even in the state of Mississippi, they removed the federal banner or the Confederate banner from the Mississippi flag. What that suggests to me is that there's something going on that's different in our country. So let me tell you what I have decided to do. Right now, our office operates from two prongs. First prong being holding offenders responsible for crime. And the second prong that I created was making our county safer by developing crime prevention programs. Well, one of the things that we're going to do as we move forward, we're going to dedicate the third prong to police reform. We're going to be working both nationally and locally to improve policing in our community. We've got to start facing the truth that many people don't trust the police. When they don't trust the police, they don't trust the DA. When they don't trust the DA, that means people don't participate. We've got to get better participation. And I believe that starts with improving policing in our community. And we're going to be spending a lot of time doing that. The other major thing that we're going to do is I've gotten the feeling that we've been doing a lot of work, but we're going to have to do more work communicating what we do directly to community members. And we're going to spend a lot more time talking with community members so people will understand what we're doing, why we're making such decisions. But most importantly, we want to listen to the community so that we can develop in a way that is also beneficial to the community as well.
We had an opportunity to spend some time together last week and curated a moment so that other individuals, at the neighborhood level would be able to see what it looks like to get your record expunged, what it looks like to have your court record sealed, and the importance of it. Shout out to my brother Parlay from them Franchise Boys, who was the brother who really was kind of the blueprint to show folks how it's done. What will your office be doing moving forward to bring those type of initiatives to the ground level, bring them to the people so that folks don't have to learn about it, they don't have to know about it, they don't have to have someone bring them there, but will actually be present, be visible, be accessible for folks to engage in expunging their records and sealing their records?
Well, I think we are going to pick up on one of your suggestions. We talked about, we had been having church functions and conferences in the community where we would ask people to come to those and get their records expunged. We made it available in the office through online, and you can actually physically come to the office. But we're going to adopt your suggestion. We're going to have some planned times that we actually come out to the community. And we're going to be probably coming out to some unconventional places. We just aren't going to just come to churches, but we might come to some clubs and other places where people congregate, because what we're trying to do is to reach people. And I really have to congratulate Parlay for what he did, because I think not only did he do it for himself, he did it for a whole range of people who I think sometimes are reluctant to come down to the courthouse to start the process, because they start thinking about all of the reasons why they couldn't get their records expunged. But what he said and what we keep saying is, you need to come in and apply anyway. And let's see if we can work on it, get it expunged. Because even if you don't get it expunged, we can always go back to the legislature, and we have to continue to show them that people are not trying to hide criminal conduct. What people are trying to do is get a job. They're trying to be able to get a career. And the only way that they can do that in many instances is not allow employers to see that past criminal record. And so my hat's off to him. And we're hoping that we get other people from the community to come in, and let's go with this process of getting these records clear.
I even offered to you with all the personalities, social media influencers, artists, rappers, singers, comedians that we have supporting you, and we can put on a whole concert and draw people in and be a sponge of records at the same time. We could really revolutionize what that looks like by attracting folks to something to go to enjoy themselves, but also, you know, re-accessing their full-fledged citizenry as they deserve. Fani has said there's over 100 unsolved cases against police brutality currently in Fulton County. I know that at the grassroots level, we had maybe 16, 17 that were significant to us that we have had some conversations about. Can you speak to that 100 unresolved police brutality cases that she speaks of? Is it true?
No, I think what she's talking about in our public integrity unit, the public integrity unit not only investigates police misconduct, but we also investigate in that unit thefts by government officials. If the code enforcement people might have been involved in some illegal activity, we investigate those things as well. So the 100 cases that we might have, many of them don't involve police misconduct. So what she's talking about is really an exaggeration. But you know, she is repeating the same agenda as the union. You know, it's kind of funny when on the one hand, they're complaining that the cases are too slow, but when we charge these officers in Rayshard Brooks, they say that you're moving too fast. So which one is it? You can't have it both ways. And the truth of the matter is they don't want it anyway. They don't want anybody prosecuted. And I hope that people are smart enough not to fall for it. In fact, we still are having problems getting cooperation from the police department. I think you are well aware that when there's a normal kind of case in the police department, if they charged you with a crime, the police would bring the stuff over to my office. But when it's a police officer, what the police start saying is, well, you need an open records request. It's crazy that we have to make an open records request to get that same evidence. We've got to file a subpoena to get the same evidence. And then when the evidence doesn't come to the office, the police are complaining that, oh man, you're just moving too slow. The officers refuse to talk to the DA. They refuse to turn on the dash cams and the body cams. You know, we saw from Rayshard Brooks that the police reported that the body cams fell off. And, you know, they email me and they walk up to me and they said, Mr. Howard, why did they fall off while they were wrestling around on the ground? But they only fell off when the shooting started. People are not crazy. People can see through it. And the same people who are doing that are complaining that, oh, Mr. Howard, you just taking too long to get my case. And really what they're really saying is they don't want us to do them at all, but we're not going to be intimidated. We're not going to be dissuaded. We're going to continue to investigate those cases.
I know that the work that you do can be easy. And I know that it comes met with a certain amount of resistance and probably things that the public isn't even aware of. And so I do give you applause for pushing back and being courageous in that way. I do think we have a ways to go. But with that in mind, even with all the resistance that you are met with and the uncooperativeness of the police department, how do you plan to effectively combat police brutality here in Atlanta, especially in Fulton County?
Well, that's where you come in, because we really need your help. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to start our monthly meetings where we meet with the community, and we're going to be going over these cases. And what we're going to be looking for as we look at the cases, for instance, if we look at a case and we report to the community that we've had to file an open records request, so then we ought to be able to go back to the city of Atlanta and say, as a group, why is the DA having to file an open records request? Those are the kinds of things I think that we can improve just by having all of us working together. And that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to all of us working together, because that's the only way we're going to get this thing solved. Is
there legislation that we, the public, could be pushing our state legislature on that will give our district attorneys more autonomy and indictment power, especially in regards to police officers and circumventing the grand jury process?
Well, I have put together a list of 9 recommendations. And the first item on that 9 list is the power of the DA to indict police officers without going through a grand jury. I mean, we could save a whole lot of time if we did it that way. The grand jury system is heavily weighted in favor of police officers because they get a chance to come in and make a statement before the grand jury. Other defendants don't get that opportunity. I believe that when it involves a police officer killing a citizen, the DA should have the ability and authority to indict that person directly. People have said, wow, you shouldn't give the DA that much power. Well, this is the same DA who can decide to utilize the death penalty. Why can't the DA just decide to indict somebody if there's enough evidence? I think not only would it save time, but what it would also do for the community is to call out some of the DAs who didn't plan to indict the officers in the first place. We need that honesty if we're ever going to reform our system.
Indeed. Thank you so much, District Attorney Howard. And Shivy, thank you for those questions, man. That really, really pushes the conversation. And I know that we were scheduled to go from 6 p.m. to 7, but we've got an awesome audience still with us. And I wanted to make sure we got our round in with Christian Wildsmith for the great conversations that we've had. I think that Christian can add a level of questioning to the conversation as well to really, really add to what we've been discussing this evening. District Attorney, did you still have time to answer more questions? I know you keep a busy schedule, but we wanted to make sure we got as much of the conversation. And Christian, are you with us now?
I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Awesome. You out there braving the weather, man. We appreciate you for continuing to stick with us, man.
Yeah, my apologies. I had a meeting at the last minute up in Winder, Georgia, and the reception up here is terrible. But thank you for giving me the floor. I want to make you guys aware of something, and I'm not sure that everybody is aware of, and I'll tie a question into this as well. So after I found out I was no longer in the race, I met with both D.A. Howard and his opponent, Fonnie Willis. T.I. or Tip Harris was present. Parlay from them Franchise Boys was present. And Shaka Zulu, a co-founder of Disturbing the Peace Records and an executive with Spotify, was present. And in this meeting, we brought up the issue of Fonnie being endorsed by Mary Norwood and the police union and a lot of Republicans, and gave her the opportunity as a gesture of good faith to return that money. And T.I. offered to replace that money on the spot. We're talking about over 100 grand. Fonnie said no. Mr. Howard, I want to know from you, why have you never taken money from police unions? Why have you never put yourself in a position to even give the perception that you've been bought, that your alliances are against the community? I think it's important for people to know why you have been a DA independent of police unions. And I think people really need to know that your opponent thought it was okay to have that endorsement and have those alliances and have that money when she was given the opportunity to have it replaced by the community, and she said no. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Howard?
Well, I believe that the vision of the union is inconsistent with the community, and they're also inconsistent with the better ends of justice. Because Christian, as you know, and you've been able to recount for the citizens what Mary Norwood said to you about putting young children in jail in return for an endorsement, and you turned it down. I thought that it was really ironic that when Fonnie Willis accepted the endorsement of the Atlanta Police Union, that on that very night, the president of the union gave a speech. And in his speech, what he talked about was he complained that the young juvenile offenders were being allowed to return to their parents' homes. Well, we both know what is the alternative. If you don't go home to your parents, you go to jail. They were complaining about these children being allowed to go to their homes. They also complained about what they talked about was enhanced penalties and enhanced enforcement for juveniles. Well, those are code words to say, we want to put them in jail, which was in fact the same thing that Mary Norwood said to you. And my feeling is that that desire to put young people in jail, the other vision of the union is that no matter what those officers might do, that they should not be held responsible. I do not believe that you, on one hand, can accept money from a group with that philosophy and maintain your independence as a district attorney. And that's why I refuse to accept money. That's why they don't even come by to talk to me. And that's why I agree with Tip Harris. Fonnie Willis should have returned the money to them, because I don't think a DA should do it, and particularly a DA in Fulton County.
So piggybacking off of that, you know, throughout this campaign season, we saw Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and then right here at home we had Rayshard Brooks. While I was in the race, I thought it was important to really speak up for the Black community, because I don't think that people have done that in the past. But I give you credit, you have. And so I felt like equality and true justice was at stake for the Black community. So I want to know, what do you think is at stake now, not just for the Black community, but for Fulton County? And a two-part question, you know, throughout your 23 years in office, what have been some of the things that you have had to fight for being RDA?
Well, I agree with you, man. I think that this question of systematic racism, I think the bias against people of color by the police department, it is something that we have to solve now. You know, as I've mentioned to you several times, John Lewis and Martin Luther King talked about it in 1963. John Lewis, when he dies in 2020, is still referencing Rayshard Brooks and police brutality. But I think his death and people that are marching now, what they're saying is, we have got to solve this now. If we don't solve it, we're going to continue these problems in our country. So what I've had to overcome is this great backlash when we decided, first of all, to investigate these police shootings, and secondly, to move forward with presenting them before grand juries. I've had the police departments to put tickets on my cars. I've had them to tow away the cars from our police departments. I've had them to say some very ugly things to me. In fact, when the Rayshard Brooks case, when we decided to seek the arrest warrants, people might not understand that I had to require around-the-clock security because of racial threats that I received, not only to me, but to my family. And we need to solve those things in our country. But the only way we're going to solve them, we have to look them in the eye directly. We can't keep covering them up. We can't be under the influence of the police unions. We got to be under the influence of truth and justice.
I got two more questions for you. So this next one, forgive me if you guys covered this while I was having reception problems, but House Bill 838, did you guys cover that?
No, we hadn't talked about it.
So that is something that I think a lot of people in the community don't know about. Will you please take, your time to explain what that is and what's at stake with that bill that's sitting on Governor Kemp's desk?
Well, Christian, I don't know if you remember this. You and I were seated together that day at Ebenezer at Rayshard Brooks' funeral. And I told people the way we were sitting, when the family members came in, they were looking directly at you and me. And, Christian, they didn't say anything to us. But what I got the impression they were saying to me was, Mr. Howard, we counting on you to stand up for us. But you and I did not know that at the time we were sitting in Ebenezer Baptist Church, that the Republican legislators were passing this bill, House Bill or Senate Bill 838. And it's a terrible bill. And it does several things that people ought to be aware of. It creates this crime called intimidation of a police officer. So if you make contact with a policeman and you say something to the policeman that the policeman doesn't like, you can get charged with a felony. Now, Christian, do you think the police departments, the union people, do they think that Paul Howard is going to enforce that law? No. So that's one of the reasons that they are working hard to make sure that I'm not in office, because that's ridiculous. The other thing that bill does, it gives the police an opportunity to sue citizens who file complaints against police officers. And the reason that's so troublesome is because the union hires lawyers for police officers. So that means that some lawyer, like Noah Pines, is possibly going to be filing suits against citizens who file a complaint. And how more chilling could you get than having somebody suing you for filing a legitimate complaint? The other thing that I think is something in that bill that we really have to pay attention to is whether or not it, in effect, has outlawed citizen review committees, because it talks about in the bill who can interview a police officer. And it seems to kind of indicate that that could only be done by another police official. If that's the case, you got to wonder, can we maintain citizen review boards? And every municipality ought to have a citizen review board.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I'll close out with this. I think it's important for me to also highlight for the folks who I don't know on this call, who I've never met or had the opportunity to speak to before or hear me speak. When I decided to endorse D.A. Howard, I had a very, very deep personal issue against Paul. And we met as men, and we sat down and spoke. And I put those personal differences to the side because I cared about one thing. I cared about our justice system being more fair and just, specifically for the Black and brown communities, and being a little bit more progressive going forward. And one of the things that I spoke about with him and with Fonnie Willis was bringing some healing and closure to the APS case. The Atlanta Public School case is something that a lot of people in Atlanta still feel strongly about. A lot of people still want to see something done about that case. And so I've been accused by Fonnie of committing a crime by talking about the case. But I want to point out that D.A. Howard was willing to hear not just me, but hear those educators out and hear the community out about bringing healing and closure. We did not try to go back on what the verdict was. We did not try to do anything illegal. And so I would like for you to take this time to let people know why you thought it was important to bring some healing and closure to that. But before you answer, I want to point this out too. Fonnie was not willing to talk about it. And the person who made these conversations public, Bob Rubin, he is an attorney representing the killer of Ahmaud Arbery. He also donated money to Fonnie Willis. So it doesn't surprise me that he went public with these conversations and tried to paint me and Mr. Howard in a negative light. So you can let the community know what we were trying to do and how we were trying to bring some healing to that case.
Well, Christian, I've said this before. I think one of the worst things that happened in this election is how Fonnie Willis has tried to characterize you. I told her to her face that I thought that it was terrible that she somehow would make it appear that you had committed a criminal act, particularly to do it on the basis of a lawyer who was representing the guy who killed Ahmaud Arbery. The whole conversation about this selling some kind of endorsement is the only reason we're talking about it is because of that lawyer. I don't even think we ought to be giving him that credit that we should even discuss it. But they brought it up, he said it, and this is what people got to think about. That lawyer represents one of the defendants, one of the teacher defendants. It would seem that if he was actually representing his client, he would have wanted this settlement to go through. But rather than to do that, he says, I would much rather somehow defame Christian Wise Smith and Paul Howard than to represent my own client. And I think that kind of says to people what kind of person he is. And it also says what kind of credibility they should give to the statements that he's making. But this is what I believe. We've been dealing with this situation with APS for 11 years now. I believe the point that I tried to make in this case, I think the Atlanta public school system, they've gotten the point. I wanted to say to them, the testing system was flawed, that they should look at their own system and make sure that it's improved. They needed a new administration. They needed new synergies, and that's what they've done in the school system. So the point that we were trying to make, I believe that point has been made. I never intended for people to go to jail. So when these educators said to me that, hey, we're willing to accept our verdicts and we simply just don't want to go to jail or get any probation added on to us, I thought that was a great move. It is time for healing. It is time for our community to move on. And I'm just sorry that they tried to make it appear that you were doing something wrong, when I think that people all across our community agree with you that it is time for us to move on.
Yeah, Howard, thank you for taking the time to answer my questions. Thank you for taking the time too to also figure out how you can work with, folks who really done a lot to hear our voices and hear some of the things that we care about. And on August 11th, I will be voting for you. I've been telling folks to vote for you. We've been, working with you as much as we can to make sure we get this election home on August 11th. So thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to be on this call.
Well, thank you, Christian. We appreciate you as well, and appreciate you working through the technical issues on the side. I think that you provided a very, very insightful layer to your experience in this race, the conversations related to the issues in this race, and we appreciate your time. And I also want to thank, Shivy. I want to thank Kenneth Mitchell as well, and also Shari for co-hosting, really as moderators for this particular conversation with District Attorney Howard. As a reminder, for those folks that have been with us from the beginning, or if you're just now joining us, we have had a very, very candid conversation with District Attorney Howard about his involvement, his proven track record, and things related to this race. August 11th is the runoff date, which is next week, Tuesday. We know that this race is critical for our community, and I will be voting for District Attorney Howard. Based on this conversation, we have certainly people that I've talked to in the community, being a fourth generation Atlantan, we take pride in having a district attorney's office that represents us and represents the issues. And what I've also seen, District Attorney Howard, is this willingness for you to come to the table as well and say, hey, I still want to continue to work with the community. There are some ways to do this in an innovative space, through technology, through relationships. And as our elected officials continue to evolve in the space and doing the work, I really think that's a noble thing. And thank you for your leadership in that regard. And with that, I'll yield the floor to you for any last words. We were scheduled to go till about 7, but the conversation went so well that we're now at 7:20, but I'll let you close things out. If you have any other comments for the guests, or any words or additional words for the additional moderators.
Well, again, I'm just so glad to have you as the moderator for this program. You've got a really bright future before you, and hopefully maybe in a very short while we can return the favor and we can put you here in the hot spot and have you to answer some questions for us. And we cannot forget Jessica Waikocha, who has been working day and night to put this together. Jessica is a volunteer on our staff, and she has done just a tremendous job. And I really want to thank her. Again, I want to urge people to vote right now. You can vote right now. Early voting ends on August the 7th. And I tell people to go and vote now, because we never know what kind of tricks are going to happen on August 11th. We had a lot of problems in the last election, the computers not working, some of the voting precincts not being open. And so we know that voter suppression is real, and it's real in this case. So I ask people to go and vote. This is a huge election for our county. I think it's going to say to many people, where are we going in Fulton County? Are we going back to the days when 15 or 20 Black men were killed by the police, or are we going to go forward? I believe that people don't want to go back. I believe people want to go forward. And I believe into the only way that you can do that is to vote for Paul Howard. So I hope I'll see you at the polls. If you don't vote early, I'll see you at the polls on August 11th. And thank you so much.
And District Attorney, I wanted to make sure for our viewers, where can they go and find more information about you and the campaign as it relates to continuing a conversation, for information that they want to share with their networks as well?
And that's at dapaulhoward.com. Is that correct? And that's where our website is. I've got one of my media consultants here and who reemphasizes it, but it's dapaulhoward.com. And there's all kinds of information available about me and this race.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much again. Y'all have a great rest of your Monday and a great evening. And thank you so much for joining us. Y'all be sure to vote for Paul Howard on August the 11th in the runoff for District Attorney.
Thank you.